Okay, this is Tuesday's Live, take two. Uh, if you were there earlier, you know that Facebook just cut us off right in the middle. Who knows? Maybe this is part of our new normal. It certainly went right along with the topic of today. So we're going to try this instead. I'm going to record this in Zoom, and then we'll upload the recording to the group. So it's a little bit weird because right now I'm kind of talking to y'all aren't here in this year. But this is just the monitor and adjust that we're going to be doing, I imagine, as things progress. So we're going to start right over, right from the beginning. Excuse me. So here we go. So the irony is today's topic is the alchemy of adversity, and what this even means. Well, I mean, you could argue that our adversity started with, I could argue that mine started this morning with the pollen here. I can't see anything without some readers today. My tripod fell apart right when I was getting ready to start the live, so that was a quick adjustment. And then Facebook booted it out. There's another adjustment. So you could argue that all of that's adversity, or it's just, a hiccup. In teaching, we call it monitor and adjust. So here we go. Alchemy of adversity. What does that even mean? Well, first let's talk about alchemy, because this is fascinating, y'all, or at least to me. Alchemy is the forerunner, the precursor of modern day chemistry. And it's funny, I keep looking up above because I'm expecting the little I'm expecting my phone to be up there and for all of y'all to be there. So if I'm looking all over the place, just, again, please bear with me here. So anyway, alchemy is the medieval forerunner of modern day chemistry, and it's based on very early and very rudimentary understanding about chemical processes and the transformation of matter. And it's particularly concerned with attempts to change other metals into gold. And the idea was if they could melt off anything that didn't belong, anything that wasn't gold, then all that would be left was the gold. And the very first time I heard about this or read about it, read the book The Alchemist, for example, I thought, what a wonderful, wonderful metaphor for personal transformation. Melting off anything that isn't really helpful, that isn't helping you be your most genuine, your most fully actualized self. And I know I've been kind of going on about what can happen for us inside the chrysalis of this pandemic that's been just sort of thrust on us. But I am literally, I think I used this word earlier, but I am literally gobsmacked by the possibilities for the alchemy and the transformation that can happen for us as individuals and for the world inside this event. It's a tipping point. I'm seeing this as a tipping point, and we get to decide to a very large extent which way we fall. And let's make some good choices there. So let's go back to this idea. The purpose of alchemy then is to melt off anything that isn't gold and just leave behind the gold. When times are easy or just normal, we become complacent. And that is absolutely human nature. We just feel like our way is smooth. We're not getting any real pushback from anything. So we just keep doing what we're doing until something happens. And at a personal level, that could be, I think our biggies are changes in relationship or health or finances, or if we see any of those things happening to someone that we love. The big personal changes are, the biggest ones are things like death or divorce, cancer or menopause. It could be empty nest. It could be losing a job. It could be changing jobs. It could be the financial changes that come with almost any of those things. And so we're constantly constantly in a state of transition, a state of alchemy. We're constantly getting bumped out of our complacency. And that really means we're constantly in a state of alchemy, a state of change. So with the little things, we tend to respond with annoyance. We get irritated. And that annoyance and that irritation may just dig our rut deeper. We may just get further down into our hole. But the bigger thing is that alchemy, what happens in alchemy, with or any change really, the biggest change comes through grief. And grief is not, it's not only about bereavement. When you were a child, you were much more in touch with this. Grief is the natural and spontaneous response to something that's happened. You know, for a little kid, okay, my phone just did one of those bizarre, freaky alerts. But anyway, when you're a little kid, grief is natural. It comes very natural to us. It's completely spontaneous. You know, when your bike is stolen, or your favorite toy gets broken, or you don't get your way, you know, that child's heart, I mean, it's certainly true for me, but that child's heart is broken. She weeps, she wails, she carries on, she owns every bit of that grief. And my 3-year-old grandson, we joke that he's in training for his future Oscar. but as we grow older, we start hearing voices of other people, those outside voices. They start intruding and they start telling us things like, just grow up, stop acting like a baby. And so we begin separating ourselves from our natural ability to grieve. We begin losing it. And grief is actually one of our most natural forms of release. So instead of letting our grief take its natural course, its healing course, its changing course, we end up holding it in because we've been told to grow up, or we try to hold it in. But then what happens is it festers. And so instead of the alchemy creating healing, we get the opposite. It's like we're creating this alchemy of hurting ourselves, of creating an infection inside ourselves. It's a form of self-harming. So it's not unreasonable, it's not even outlandish to feel like we're losing everything right now. So wouldn't it stand to reason that grief needs to be a big part of our process? I mean, grief is about dealing with loss, and it would be easy to argue that we're in the process of losing almost everything that's familiar. What's happening in the world is creating this huge, massive grief response throughout all of humanity. We're not grieving alone right now. We're in collective grief. And so we collectively, as well as individually, have a decision to make. Are we going to allow this grief to take its very natural, transformational, healing course, or are we going to fight against it and pretend the grief isn't happening? Both of those can actually cause festering, because fighting against something is a form of denial, and denial is a form of fear, and fear just keeps you stuck. So fear creates this emotional and physical and spiritual wounds, and wounds fester. And this denial is actually holding back the next stage of grieving, because denial is the first stage of grieving. Now, it could pop out as things like, oh, this can't be happening. I can't believe this is happening. Just stop this from happening. But denial actually serves a purpose. And of course, everything serves a purpose for us if we can learn to allow that perspective. Denial is creating a little bubble, a little buffer. Denial helps us survive. It gives us, it kind of gives us this moment of emptiness. We've put this buffer of denial out around us, this bubble of denial, and inside that bubble, we're kind of getting this moment emptiness. And yes, it might feel like everything is meaningless and overwhelming, but we need to kind of push everything back for just a little bit. I mean, too much is happening. We can't process everything all at once, and our mind's in shock. We feel numb. We wonder how to go on. We wonder if we can go on. Sometimes we even wonder if we should go on. But inside that little bubble, that little buffer, as long as we don't stay there, as long as we don't get stuck, but inside there for a moment is the space and the grace to actually decide, can I go on, or why should I go on? And that is a choice. Inside the little bubble, though, we can do that. We can do that because we've created a little space where it's not all just crowding in on us at the same time. It kind of almost doesn't matter which one you decide, because either one is probably going to lead to the next stage of grief, and that is anger. And sometimes anger looks like just really deep sadness. Sometimes it looks both. Sometimes it's going to cycle, because grieving isn't linear. And if you can just allow it instead of pushing it away or sinking into depression, which is its own stage of grief, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But then you may ask, and it's a perfectly legitimate question, you may ask, where's God in all of this? Regardless of what your name for God might be, where's God in all of this? And underneath all of that anger is pain. You know, anger sometimes creates a buffer for pain. And it's natural. It's natural in the midst of loss to feel deserted, to feel abandoned. That's true for the child who's lost her bike, for the woman who's lost her husband, to the world who's lost everything that feels familiar. It's lost its footing. But we live in a society, certainly in Western culture, we live in a society that fears anger. And good anger, and yes, there's such a thing, good anger is strength. It can be an anchor. It can give a temporary structure to the loss, even to the feeling of nothingness. So instead of pushing our feelings away, our anger away, we can be like the child we were before we lost this ability. We can connect to our feelings of grief and to our feelings of anger. We can listen to them. We can even tell them we're grateful for the help they're bringing, the information they're bringing. Because did you know you can talk directly to your feelings? You know, they're almost like children. Our feelings are. They want to know that we see them. They want to know that we hear them. They want to know that they matter. But we don't let our kids get away with whatever it is they're doing. We don't let them get their way all the time. And the same thing is true of our feelings. So, you know, think about what your children do, or at least what mine did. I have a feeling it's fairly universal. But your children, when they're not getting their way, they usually go straight for bargaining. And bargaining is actually the next stage of grief. And so when there's a loss, okay, any kind of loss, there are two very normal states of being. Oh, well, actually, no, not when there's a loss. How about before there's a loss? There are two very normal and natural states of being. One is complacency. I'll always have this thing. I'll always have this person. The other is gratitude. I'm so grateful I have this person. I'm so grateful I have this thing. And then after loss, you know, usually while we're still in our state of disbelief, we start negotiating. I mean, it's like autopilot. We start negotiating. If I promise, oh, I love this. If I promise to devote the rest of my life to feeding the hungry, you know, could I wake up tomorrow and find out this was all a bad dream, that none of this ever happened? That's true. right now in the middle of this pandemic. It's true if you've lost someone to death. It's true if you've had a catastrophic illness or accident that's changed everything. There is that moment of, can I wake up tomorrow and this never happened? What can I do to negotiate? What can we trade here? And that, though, I mean, it's so tempting, but that is a minefield, an absolute minefield, because with bargaining, one thing that it can cause is guilt. It starts dredging up all the if onlys. It starts causing us to find fault in ourselves and causing us to beat ourselves up over what we could have done differently. Bargaining, it also keeps us stuck in the past. It keeps us ruminating over things that have already happened. They're over. We can't change them. So bringing ourselves back into the present, though, which is what has to happen next, but bringing ourselves back into the present, that can lead to depression. Those empty feelings re-enter, that realization of loss re-enters, only now you know it wasn't a dream, and you can't negotiate your way out of it. You don't have any bargaining chips in this situation. So when grief enters this time, it may be in a much deeper level. It may be deeper than you ever imagined. And you may, at this point, you may feel hopeless. It may feel like these feelings are going to last forever. But it's important to understand, regardless of the cause for your grief, that feeling, this type of depression, this type of feeling of hopelessness, that's not a sign of mental illness. It is a very appropriate response to a loss. It's a way to withdraw from life. Remember, we talked in the beginning that there was a withdrawal and the denial. Well, now we've come through some of these stages, and this withdrawal is it's a withdrawal from this fog of intense sadness. We've acknowledged that this thing has happened, that we can't bargain our way out of it, and now we're in this fog, and we could almost look at it like a cloud, this sort of like cuddling up to us. So it's not that kind. It's not the bad kind of depression. It's a sadness. It's allowing the sadness in, and yet for however long it takes. I mean, this is not something you want to just snap out of, like, buck up, buttercup. That's not the answer, but it's also not the place to get stuck. So, but think about it. To not experience or allow any kind of depression or sadness or grief after loss, that would be the unnatural response. So depression is in this case, is more a way to allow this new reality to just settle deep into your soul, to allow it to become part of your reality, because whether you like it or not, whatever's causing your grief, it is part of your reality now. And you don't, grieving is not linear, but we don't want to just stay in this loop. We don't want to just keep regurgitating all of it. We want to sink into each stage of it, each step, and let it do its part to heal us. So now that we've done all of that, and we're kind of sunk into this realization that whatever has caused our grief is part of our reality now, that can lead to the next step, the final step of grieving, and that is acceptance. And acceptance is sometimes confused with, oh, everything's okay, it's all okay. Well, that's almost as bad as pretending it never happened, because it's not true. In a very real sense, it's not okay, because things aren't going to go back to the way they were before. So acceptance is, acceptance is just a willingness to say, this happened. It was awful. But now I can go forward. It's over. I can't change it, but I can go forward. And let me tell you something. None of this would matter. You know, this saying it's all okay, that's kind of silly because it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't even feel the need to say that if you didn't care. You wouldn't be grieving. Instead, this stage, let me say it again, this stage is about accepting the reality of what happened, the fact of it. Remember our talks about every story has two parts, the facts and the stories we tell ourselves. We might as well accept the facts. Grieving helps us get to the point of telling a better story. Grieving, accepting, helps us to stop fighting, to get out of the quicksand. And there's a wisdom, an absolute wisdom that comes between knowing the difference between something you can change and something you can't change. Okay? And the wisdom that comes with this acceptance, that's a big part of becoming found in your life, whether that realization of acceptance comes from a major event like death or what's going on in the world, or even if it comes from something that would be a blip or less for anyone else. If it's important to you, that's what matters. This is alchemy. This is the breaking down of what was in order to usher in whatever is becoming. Okay? Remember, alchemy is melting off, burning off whatever is not gold. Breaking down so it can usher in the gold, so that gold can be becoming. Right now, we are literally watching so many old structures breaking down. We're watching this happen in real time. We don't know from 1 minute to the next. We almost don't know what might fall next. And this situation, this world situation, is a collective. Yes, for some people, it's going to be intensely personal. They're going to have losses. They're going to have personal losses. And yet we are all sharing it one way or another. For each of us as individuals, our old patterns will be showing up. Okay? Our habitual patterns of how we face loss, of how we face change, of how we face adversity, all of those are going to be showing up. Our patterns of fear, of love, of grace, or anger. Just count on it. They're all here now. And we can meet this process like any other loss. We can use the grieving process to help us become anew, to emerge like the phoenix from the ashes. The alchemy that happens inside adversity, like grief, is unavoidable. But humans are designed with the ability to use adversity the same way the butterfly does. And remember, we talked about the butterfly yesterday. The caterpillar melts into this goo, and then the goo starts recombining to make wings and make the butterfly. We, as humans, we are designed in the same way. We have the same possibilities. And that right there, that is the pure alchemy of adversity. Thank you all. I love you so much. I appreciate so much that we're all in this together with technology and whatever, but I just love you, and I thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.